Hi, I'm Rick Bennett. This is a self-portrait, so I look like this on a good day. Today, I'm going to demonstrate painting a miniature waterscape. This is one I did that's going to be similar in what I'm going to attempt to do. The reason I'm doing a miniature is I had just enough wood to build this little tiny frame. And so that's the size that I'm going to be painting to. I took a photograph many years ago off the end of Key West at the sunset. This is going to be my inspiration and my starting point. I believe that you always should have an idea when you start a painting, but you don't necessarily have to end up there. You need to follow the paint and what the painting needs. This is going to be a painting I did that's going to be kind of my inspiration for taking off on this thing. There again, it may or may not look like this when I finish. It's going to be fast and easy. This is a sheet of paper that had some paint on it from a demonstration. I liked what the granulation did in some of this, especially up at the top. That'll probably be another painting. But down here, I had some paint already on there, and so I'm just going to use what's underneath. You'll notice that this boat is silhouetted, so I want some of that color that's around there to be showing through as part of the painting. So before I start a painting, I pick my colors and I test them. Now this is a set of pigments that I've used before in painting, so I knew it before, but here is what I do when I check out my colors. I run them together and look at the mixes. I know cerulean and ultramarine are just perfect in a sky, but when you're testing colors, run them across a nose, so you're going to get some greens in there, and if you're going to use that cerulean with the new gamboge. So if you want to take a look, this is a list of the colors that I'm using in it. I like Daniel Smith's new gamboge. Some of the new mixes are a little brown with some other brands. I like the Maya Mary Blue Orange Lake. It's a little bit more delicate orange. I don't have any preference on ultramarine, and I think that Lucas or Winsor Newton cerulean moves better. I like it better, those that do that. Now, something else I'm going to use in this, and I like to do a lot, is Derwent Ink Tints pencils, watercolor pencils, and they dissolve like watercolor and move, but they go down in a unique way, as we're going to see. So that's the colors and the atmosphere we're going to get. Look at how this granulation happens in there. That happens when you're painting wet, and that's my intention to have happen. This is how my palette normally looks. It's messy. If I have to paint a pale yellow, I have to clean up my yellows. But for the purposes of today, I'm using limited colors, so I'm just got it already set up in a small palette, so it's going to be easier to get in close to the camera. As far as brushes, I tend to like do I have one here? The Mimic Kolinsky. It's the made by Creative Mark. It stays soft. It holds a point. It's synthetic, but it's really inexpensive, and so I get some points with it. I don't have a preference in terms of brands and say you have to use this or that, but that's one that is inexpensive and works for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a larger brush, and I'm going to wet my area. And it needs to be clean. I'm just going to wet the whole area. In a miniature, it doesn't take long, so I don't have to have a huge brush, because I want to have time to work in this. So by wetting the whole area, it's going to be soupy, and I'll get a juicy flow. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just take my thirsty brush that I just wet, get the water out. I'm just going to run across this one more time, just to keep it from having big puddles. If I didn't have this under the camera stand, I would lift it sideways and let it pour off. So we're going to work first just by building by values. So I'm going to come out here and just start dropping in some sky. Now see how that flows? But you're getting that almost feathery look. You can just run your brush right next to it and get rid of that. You can use a thirsty brush to lift it out. But what I want to do is just start building some clouds. And that's by dropping in some values. And I'm just pretending to act as if I know what clouds look like. They're fluffy, they're horizontal. You're gonna have some, you could get a photograph and make sure you're doing this right. Now I like to send back the sky a little bit with some cerulean. And notice I'm painting over the top of my boat because I want some of those colors to show through. Look at that cloud right there. That's nice. I don't care who you are. All right. Now I'm painting out beyond where I think the edges of my painting is going to be cut off to. It's going to be about this proportion and size. But once I'm finished, I can move the borders left or right depending on where my happiest spots are. Now notice that the reflections, so right down in here, I'm just going to calm this down a little bit right in here because that white's going to be too bright compared to some of the rest. Notice I positioned this boat where that pattern of speckle happened to be, and that's going to be my reflection, part of my reflection of the boat. Now, because I don't want to draw the eye too much to this foreground, I'm going to just make it a little calmer. And I'm doing horizontal strokes so that it'll talk about distance. Wow, that's just painting itself. I haven't even put any yellow down yet. Let's get a little crazy with some yellow. I've got a test spot here, so sometimes I can just test the paint to make in my brush to make sure it's what I kind of want it to be. Yeah, see how that parts? That's nice. I'm just going to get a little bit more of that down here. And if it's not doing what you wanted to do, stop doing that and try something else. You can always take your brush, dab out all the pigment, and you can lift where you want to lift out. So I can drop in, and then I can just lift back wherever I want to lift back. And what I might do is take a little bit of this orange lake, just about, let's see that. Let's go into that little bit of that. See what happens out here? You can test on your outside where you're not doing. Say you get some browns and some undertones there. That's oh yeah, that neutral's nice. So I'm just going to drop some neutrals in just to quiet down some of that blue by dropping in the complement of Orange Lake. All right. I've just played around. Now, I'm thinking that's a little too loud right there, so I'm taking my damp brush. That's just a little strong, that brown is. So I'm just gonna lift it out a little bit. I need some blue in that foreground. So I'm gonna come in with some of that cerulean, I think. Yeah, see. And I'm getting some horizontals. Horizontals talk about distance and depth and lines. So I'm just gonna. Now right underneath this boat, let's just get some values going. See that cell right there? So I need to come up. And I need to, got a sail there, and a sail there. Now I'm gonna just let that hint at it. Once this dries, I'm gonna come in and do some dry brush right on top of that. Now here is where the magic happens with the pencils. I start with my Chinese ink Derwent watercolor pencil. And if you start out here, you can practice before you get in. But I'm just going to talk about a distant shoreline. I've got a line drawn on there, whether you can see it or not. Now, I transferred this to this paper because I needed to get some painting done today and didn't want to spend a lot of time. I need to find my edge of the sail right there. There's my edge of my sail. And so I transferred it to the paper with carbon paper. Now notice this is dark and it's not very, so I've got this brown. And what I like about this, look, see how it's going down in a pebbly manner and a non-brush, brush looking like line work. Now right above that, I'm just gonna come in with this brown and see that softens, it's not so stark. So I've got some shadows that's in there, but I'm just making a distant tree line. Now I'm way out of where I'm gonna crop this. And it's irregular because that would be a tree line. Now one of the things I can do is I can now, because this is watercolor pencil, I can actually come in here and just play a little bit with water. See how it blends it just and smears it just a little bit, gives me some softer edges on the top of that. I like that a lot. Now right between these two sails is a little bit of land. It can be seen, so I'm gonna need to take my pencil, the brown one, where's my brown one? Right there, and make sure I can see it. The drawing's getting a little light. But I want to make sure that that spit of land is there as well. Do my black, just a tap. Having to paint with my arms out, so that makes it a little more difficult. So now I've got some land mass back there, and it just adds a horizontal element to the painting. Now I need this dry, so cover your ears up. I had a setup that was better than this, I could have paused right then and then come back in. I do not. So now I'm going to come in with some black. Now, if it was a bigger painting, I would mix my blacks using the orange and the blue to create some neutrals. But this is a very small painting, and it's going to be hard to get them to blend. So I'm using a little of the ultramarine and some Daniel Smith Lunar Black. Now here's, let's see, find my drawing, and we're just gonna come in here with a little bit of this and then drop in that sail with my hand at a distance. And I'm not worried about wonks because this is a small painting. I want this to stay wet. So I'm just gonna drop some water right there and right there. See how that's gonna keep it, it's gonna let me be able to go in and just keep working with it a little bit at a time. I've got time to do it before it dries, and I'll show you why I want it wet. See, this needs to be a little taller, and this is gonna come off of here. My hand is shaking, and that don't matter, because this is gonna be a loose, quick painting. And wonks are not a problem. I see it, my paint's getting a little light, and I don't care because I want to keep it, there we go. I want to keep it wet. Now see where this is a little thick right there? I can take an X-Acto blade after it's dry, and I can trim that back just a little bit, just scratch it right back, and it's gonna look right. So that's one way of backing up. Now here is, point of the boat starts here, it comes down like this. So I'm lifting back a little bit. I'm making the sails a little transparent because they're gonna show some light through there. Now, one of the fun things you can do is you can come in with just a little of that orange lake, the right amount on your brush. There we go. And I see the orangish tiny tones in there. You can just come in and drop just a little of that in there. It parts the blue a little bit. things I like. So I'm gonna dry that a little bit. That gives me control back. So I have a dip pen. You take a little sandpaper, rough it up on the inside, right in this area right here. And because I don't want to have to make a big old pot of pigment, I take my brush with some juicy wet color and I deposit it onto my dip pen so that I don't have to dip it into a big old ink well or whatever I'm using. Now then, as soon as I do that, I turn it in vertical, because if I put too much pigment on there, the excess will run off. But right now, I can do very fine lines. And this is going to allow me to come in and just do a little guy line there and finish off this little point right here and put in something to support the sail. And also, right over here, there's some people or there's some equipment that's just going to occlude and break up this straight line. I don't know what it is looking at the picture, and so you don't have to know what it is. You're just pretending to talk about shapes, because boats have shapes. And right here is going to be the place where the darkest, because that's where the edge of the boat touches. Now I've got a pretty dry brush, and see, I'm testing it. Look what happens when you scumble that little bit of dry brush right there. So I'm gonna come in, see the shape of this sail right here is wide and then it gets narrow. So I'm just gonna come in here and just throw some reflections in. Not quite dry enough. It's getting a little too solid. I want it to be speckly like. This comes out wide here and just starts going that way. And that's right there. I'm not getting a scumbling like I want. It works here. There we go. Let's see if it works here now. No, it's just, well, it's gonna have to be what it is. Sometimes magic happens and sometimes paint happens. The bow comes out here and it's a little back in there. Now, right up next to the boat, it's just gotta be attached a little bit. You can have a little bit of light showing. There we go. Now, I can take a little tiny brush and some water. Let's just do some of this. There we go. See what happens when I just take a little bit of water and run through it. Gives me a little bit of a dissolving of the paint marks. I want a little of that. Yeah, there we go. See these? If the wind blows just a little bit, it's gonna create a little bit of a line back there, a shadow of where the wave is keeping the light from coming straight towards the viewer. And thin lines off in the distance talk about depth and dimension. Just need a little bit of that here or there just to break some things up. There's a spot, and you can test off in this area out here to see when your brush gets just the right amounts of pigment coming off to just talk about light. Now I'm going to evaluate that. Let's see how wet that is. That's damp. If I got just a second, I can show you what I was talking about. So I like to take an X-Acto blade at the end, and I can come in, if I can get my hand in here, and I can just take it and just pull out just a little bit of the pigment. And see, it's giving me a pale right there. And if that was a problem, I could come back and just apply a little pigment to it. And that lets me just take a little bit. See how that just firmed that shape up nicely? Now also I can come into this and just create some speckles where I got too solid. When you're filming and can't get your hand up close, you lose some of the precision. There we go. Just to break up some of those solid areas just a bit, because there'd be some undulation, some refraction, so that the reflected light would come in. And I could actually come in here and do some of that same thing, because this is pretty much it's a solid right there. So I just can come in and just scratch a few speckles, some sparklies, in some spots. And I'm doing it in a horizontal manner. Just there again, talk about distance. So that's my painting, a fast miniature. And I'm going to come in and make some decisions at this point of where my happiest places are. And I think that I want a 1/3, 2/3 overall. And that's probably going to be the composition. I hope that gives you some ideas of how to paint your paintings. These same techniques can work with any subject, whether it's people or apples or seascapes. Thank you for watching.